Hey friends, it's Laura with Laura's Handmade Haven. Welcome or welcome back. I'm so glad you joined me today. We're continuing our Let's Bake Quilt Sew Along. This is week 6 in our Sew Along. This week we're going to be working on that kitchen scale and the stove. I'm so excited about the stove joining our quilt top because it is so super cute. I've definitely done some modifications to the blocks this week as I have the other weeks. And this week we're going to start at the ironing board because we're going to start with our marking for the different dials on the stove and talk about the kitchen towel and the kitchen scale. So without further ado, we're going to head on over to the ironing board and get started. Believe it or not, this is all of the shapes we have this week for our applique, but on these shapes, we have quite a bit of work to do, especially these little circles over here that I'm pressing right now. This is our cute little kitchen towel. Now you're going to notice that I have definitely modified the kitchen towel that's going to be hanging on our stove. And the reason I did that was because I don't want to do any of the hand embroidery in this quilt. So instead of doing the hand embroidery on the kitchen towel, I cut a piece of accent fabric to put in to kind of make it more like one of those little hanging tea towels that we all love and have, I'm sure, somewhere in our stash. So that's my little kitchen towel. This is the bottom of the kitchen scale. Those are going to go on over back to the design boards because we don't need those quite yet. The first thing we're going to start with this week is just drawing the different lines and things onto our clocks and our little dials. Now, if you look at the stove knob, I'm actually not going to draw the stitching on that. If you look at that, it just has a button in the middle and then it has stitching around the outside edge. So I'm going to put those over to the sewing machine because I'm just going to run a little stitch around there. I'm not actually going to worry about marking this one. Now for the stove clock, I do want to mark these little lines and the hands for the clock itself, but the center here is also a button, so we don't need to worry about that either. And then on the kitchen scale, we have a bunch of little lines to do and a circle to do, and then this cute little needle that is in the middle of it. And I'm probably going to do something a little different there just because I want to keep it simple and I want to be able to do it with machine embroidery. Now, if you haven't seen my videos before, just to let you know, I am using a Cricut light pad, and that's what I just use. It's really nice. You can just turn it on. You can adjust the brightness up or down. I'm going to go all the way up because I'm going through a layer of fabric and a layer of Pellon. And I'm using a Sewline 3-color chalk and pencil pen. I'm going to put it on the pink chalk and mark my lines. And this is the clock. I'm just going to do a straight line for the hands, and I'll know when I'm stitching that I need to make those a little thicker. And then I'm going to just make my little lines as I see them. It's definitely a little difficult to see this through the interfacing and the fabric. So I'm just kind of peeking underneath to see where all these lines are at. Now, if you didn't want to use this, you could definitely just use your ruler or a compass and mark the lines as well. That one, if you have a little off, to get that off of there. Okay, so the clock is marked, and now to do the scale. Now, the scale, the most important thing to me is the circle that goes around, so I know what the distance is there. And I'm going to mark a couple of the lines on the outside, but then I'm just going to wing it around the rest of it. And then I'm going to mark just where that needle is in the middle and put a little circle on the one end so I know that that should be a circle. All right, so those are marked. Now we are going to head to the sewing machine and do all of the stitching on these pieces first, and then we will applique them down. Now, just to make it a little easier on myself, I am going to put this on a little tearaway, and I'm just going to basically just put it on there just so nothing shifts and I don't have a problem with the little circle. I do have this on like a satin stitch for these little circles like this, and I'm using my presser foot as a guide. I'm going to stay away from the edge where the little gap in my presser foot is, and that way I should be able to have a nice even circle all the way around this little circle for the stove knobs. And again, just like we did when we do all of our other applique with this stitch, just don't push or pull. Don't push, don't force it through your machine. Let the machine go at its rate. stop and pivot as you need to. Now, since I am making a circle like this, I am going to try to stop with my needle on the right-hand side, just so it keeps it really nice and smooth all the way around this shape. Okay, so here's one of my little stove knobs, and we only have 3 more to go. Now, for sake of time, I am going to go to the clock, and I'm also going to put it on the tearaway stabilizer. And that's just, again, just to give myself a little extra security to make sure that I don't, you know, have any shifting in my fabric. Now, I am kind of doing this methodically. I want to be able to make sure that some of these lines are directly across from each other. So I am kind of thinking about that as I am stitching. All right, so I'm going to cut all of these threads off of there before I do the hands, obviously in the center, because well, there's a bunch of strings in the way. All right, so there's my clock. That turned out really good. I'm excited about that. Oh, actually, I'm going to, I had decreased the size of my satin stitch, so I'm going to increase it before I do my hands. Now, when I get to the middle, instead of stopping again, I'm just going to turn. I have no idea what time that is because I don't think that those hands are 2 different lengths. Oh well, that's okay. All right, so that's going to be how I do the stove knobs. Those, remember, will have a little button in the middle of those, and the clock will also have a little button in the middle of it where those hands meet, so that will look super cute. And then I have 3 more of these to do, and then I also have the scale. Now, the scale, I'm going to put it on here as well, again, just because I want to make sure that I have some stabilizer behind that just to ensure that my fabric doesn't shift around on me. And I'm going to do the circle first. And I have decreased my satin stitch back down a little bit. And I'm just going to kind of keep an eye on how far I am from the edge of the outer part of the circle. And I'm going to hope for the best is what I'm going to do on this one, honestly. It may not be a perfect circle, but it'll be close. And I have that pink line that I can follow as well. I didn't do too bad on that. All right, so we have a whole bunch of little lines to do around that outside. And I'm honestly going to look for a decorative stitch that maybe I can do. Okay, so on my machine, I'm going to call it a blanket stitch. And I am going to increase the width. And let me grab a little piece of scrap fabric. We're going to try this out, see what we think. I think that will look really good. So let's see if we can, let's see here. I increased the length, and that increases the space between them. Let's increase the width and see what we have here. I think that is going to look great around this little dial. So I'm going to put it so my needle goes right on that circle. And I'm going to try to start kind of in the center. Definitely going slow on this. If you use a stitch like this and you need to pivot, make sure you are on the left-hand side where it allows you to just change the direction. That looks pretty good. I'm very happy with that. And that was definitely quicker than it would have been if I would have hand stitched it. I'm just not like super efficient with hand stitching. All right, so I'm just looking at my different decorative stitches that I have, and it looks like I have kind of a teardrop here. And again, I'm going to play with, oh, look at that one. That one looks great. That would be really fun, wouldn't it? Okay, I think that's what I'm going to do on the top. Just look at your decorative stitches and see what you could do to make it work. I'm going to try this one. And obviously I'm trying this on scrap before my actual piece because, well, why wouldn't you, right? That would be silly not to. All right, so let's see what this looks like. Oh yeah, that would look great. All right, so we have a plan. We are going to clear this and we're going to go back to the satin stitch. We're going to start with that and we're going to go from one end to the other. And now we're going to back up just a little bit and we're going to go back to the circle that we had. And we have to watch it pretty closely though, because we don't want to go into that second circle. We just want the first one. All right, so there's that. And now we're just going to do the little arrow at the top. Let's try it out before we try that one on our actual piece, just to make sure. We also need to make sure we know which way it's stitching. Yep, that's what we're going to go with. All right, here we go. Okay, so that looks really good. And then this one also gets a little button in the middle. But do you see how the fabric here, it like pulled and puckered? There was no stabilizer or anything underneath it. And both of those kind of puckered and pulled. Now I would probably be able to pull that and press it out flat. But on this one with that stabilizer behind it and the Pellon too, it didn't do that at all. So this is like such a nice advantage of using this tearaway stabilizer. And then all I got to do is just tear this off. And then this is ready. I'm going to clean that up a little bit more, but this is ready to go onto my kitchen scale after I press it again, just to make sure it's really good and flat. I'm going to get my other little 3 stove knobs done, and then we'll start laying out blocks. All right, we got to make a little bias tape for our kitchen scale, and that's going to be what we lay out first. The oven actually, or the stove actually, is mostly just pieced pieces. And we will talk through that in just a few minutes. But let's make our bias tape for our kitchen scale so we can get that done. If you've been following the other videos for this quilt, then you are probably a pro at making bias tape by now. If you made it through the Let's Bake block, then you are doing well. That block was a little bit of a trick to get it done, but we made it, right? If you haven't done that block yet and you are attempting to do so, Feel free to check out the video for that one. All right, now the kitchen scale is a 6.5 inch block when it is trimmed down. I cut the background at 8 inches, or probably a little bit more than 8 inches, just because I wanted to make sure I had plenty of fabric to work with. Now, to prepare my background for this block, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it in half, right sides together. And that gives me a little crease down the middle. And that's going to help me line up my block. And let me press that back out again. That little kitchen dial, scale dial got a little wonky on me. Now what we can do is fold our kitchen scale base in half with a little finger press. Line that up on the line in our background fabric. And then we can line our little needle on our kitchen scale up. Now when I glue these on, I'm going to glue the circle on in a few spots just to make sure it goes good and stuck. But the kitchen scale itself, I'm just going to glue it from about here down. I don't want to glue that top quite yet because we're going to cut one piece of this to go up and then another piece to go across. Let me grab my 6.5 inch square so we can make sure we don't get our scale too big. All right, so I like to have at least 1/2 inch below my scale or below my applique pieces for my blocks. So I've just kind of put that, so this 1/2 inch mark is at the bottom here. All right, so I placed my ruler so 1/2 inch is below the kitchen scale. Now I want the top of the scale to be right here at this line here, which is 1/2 inch from the edge. So I'm going to cut this just a smidge shorter than that. I'm going to run a little bit of glue up the middle here. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the end. And then I'm going to stick this under my scale and straight up. But I'm going to check this again just to make sure I didn't get it too tall. We're going to put a little glue on both ends. And I'm going to use my ruler to make sure that my bias tape is the right length. Just going to cut this here. And I also want this to be 6.5 inches wide. So now with it laying on my ruler, I can just fold this other end back. Now I will just put this on here, fold this in half because that is going to go right on the middle. I'm going to put just a little dot right here in the center. All right, and then I'm going to just put my ruler so it's level with the bottom of my applique piece of my scale. And then this will be straight up here for me as well. I'll just put a few more dots. Let that fall. And then when I put this on here, everything is where it should be. And this is exactly how I want my scale to look. Now, if you don't want this piece of your scale to be that tall, then, decrease it down. That's fine. But I just want this to look just like that in the block. That's going to be super cute. Excited about that one. All right, so let's talk about the stove. Okay, so the stove block is actually a pieced block. And so what I would encourage you to do is just lay it out on a design board or your cutting table or something, just so you can kind of see how all of it goes together. Basically, you have your backsplash or the back part of the stove where the knobs are going to go, the two end pieces. These are the two pieces that go on top and bottom of the handle. Then you have two squares that will go down here. You have two ends that will go on either side of your window. And then you have one piece that will go all the way across the bottom of your stove. And then there's also some applique pieces. The towel will hang from your stove handle, and then you will applique your clock and knobs into place. All right, so let's get started on the piecing first, because that has to be done before we can do any of the applique. And when I look at this, I kind of like to break the block down. I know that I can sew this together, so I can do that. I can start sewing the pieces of the handle together and the pieces of the window unit together. So I'm going to put those over to the side and start sewing. So I'm just going to start grabbing my pieces and start putting them together in the different parts of the stove block. And the design board is just going to help me kind of keep track of what's going where. Even though I'm moving things off of there, I can still kind of have a little bit of a visual reference. So if I get lost, I can put things back. Now, if you are concerned about your backing piece of your stove drawing in too much when you applique those circles on, you could definitely applique the circles. You could definitely cut this piece wider and longer and then applique those pieces on and then cut it down to the size you needed. So if you're newer to applique, you might consider doing that. And that's just the back piece of the stove that you would cut a little bigger. Sometimes applique will cause your fabric to draw in, and if that happens, then your pieced block is not going to turn out right, because that fabric is going to be, you know, smaller than it's supposed to be. This may not make sense the way I'm doing this, but believe me, I have my design board here to the side so I can kind of see what's going where. And as I get a couple more pieces together, I'll put it back on the design board so you can see where we're at. So you can see how the method to my madness worked out for me. If you're newer to quilting and this is a little too much for you to keep track of all these different pieces and what goes where, don't feel like you need to do it like this. You know, put it back on the design board after every seam. You know, build your block out however makes sense to you. It does not need to be exactly the way I'm doing it. All right, so let's put this back here just so you can see that everything's lining up. And now this is going to sew onto those squares. And we still have our bottom piece here to do. So let's get this together. Now, when I sew this, I did not press this yet. When I sew this on here, though, I'm going to finger press my seams for that handle to the dark fabric. So both of them are going towards that handle fabric. And I can go ahead and sew this together to the bottom of my stove window. It's actually my oven window, but it's on a stove. It's kind of weird, isn't it? It's a stove top. It's a range, I guess. The top of it is a range. Now this can be sewn, the other square can be sewn to the end of this. And remember, I'm nesting those seams inward. Make sure you nest your seams. It doesn't really matter what you do with them, okay? You can definitely you can go in or you can go one way or the other. It doesn't matter. But whatever way you do on one end, make sure you do on the other, because you don't want those seams to twist across that block, because that is not going to give you the result that you want. All right, now this goes on to the top. I'm going to push that seam out. We almost have this stove put together. All right, I'm going to give this a good press, and then I'm going to glue baste my stuff on, and then we'll come back to applique both this and the kitchen scale. All right, so you can put your towel wherever you want it. It does not need to be in the center. I don't want mine in the center. I want mine offset a little bit over here because that's just kind of where I hang my towels. So we are going to glue baste our towel into place. Now, to be quite honest with you, this could have been part of the pieced block, but giving it this applique towel on top of it gives your quilt and your block some dimension. So that's definitely a fun little feature of this Let's Bake quilt. All right, I'm going to find the center of my block. This is 16.5 inches, so 18.25 is the center, and that's where I want my clock to be. I'm just going to put a few little dots of glue on it. And I am going to make sure that I am at least half of an inch down. And I am. All right, so I'm just going to honestly arbitrarily pick a straight line across the seam to be able to make sure that my knobs are all at the same spot across here. And then I'm going to move this back to the 8.25 mark, because that way, no matter where I put my knobs, they'll be evenly spaced across there. So I'm going to put one. All right, so that is where my little knobbies are going to be for my stove burners. Okay, so because I want to applique this like right now, I'm going to kind of heat set my glue. This is where you got to remember to change your foot. If you're using a 1/4 inch piecing foot and then you're going to go to a zigzag, change your foot. All right, if you have not watched my applique videos before, let me tell you really quickly, I'm using a zigzag stitch. My default settings on my Juki DX7 are 3.6 for the width and 1.4 for the length. I reduced that width all the way down to 1.8, so basically half of what the default setting is, and the length down to 0.9. So when I do applique, I always try to do bottom up. So on this one, I'm going to start with this little support stand here. And I'm just going to start and end underneath that top bias tape. And I should not have glued that down quite so well there, but I did. We'll work with it. It'll be fine. And I'm using a clear piecing foot, or clear presser foot. And it has a little triangle in the middle that helps me line up the edge of my fabric, which is honestly very handy. And that was the standard Juki DX7 foot. So if you have, or if you're looking for a machine and you're thinking about the Juki, just know that it comes with a lot of feet. A lot of feet. I was honestly impressed when I got the machine and saw all the stuff that it came with. The extension table is standard on it too, which is nice. I kind of forget that a lot of people, people that sew, not everyone that sews cares about that extension table, right? I think that's just quilters. I made my husband a couple French cuff shirts last year, and I had to hunt around and find my normal little bed for it instead of this extension table, because I couldn't do some of the shirt sleeves and stuff with that extension table on there. Okay, when I look at this, now I just told you I do bottom up, right? But this is the exception. Especially if you're newer to applique, I would strongly suggest that you do the circle before you do the scale, just in case anything decides to shift on you. If you start with the circle, then you'll be more likely to be able to work it out with the outer scale. So if you get little puckers or something, when you're doing that large piece on the outside, your circle will not be flat when you get to the middle. So start with your circle, and I do the same thing with flowers. Like if you have a flower and you have a flower center, do your center first. That way, if you have a little shifting in your fabric when you go to do the larger piece, it's not going to mess up your smaller circle center of the flower or the scale in this case. Now, since this is a top layer of your applique, just like the circle, you do need to do a stay stitch at the beginning and end. You may have noticed when I did just that little support stand, I didn't do a back stitch or a stay stitch because the seams are going to be covered by another seam later on, so you don't need to do that stay stitch. But if it's a top layer where it's not covered by anything else, then you definitely need to do a stay stitch or a back stitch. I just prefer the stay stitch because it's in one spot. The back stitch, you get a little bit of the shadowing with your thread because there's more than one layer. And I just prefer the stay stitch because it's in one spot. And again, we'll do the stay stitch at the end. And this is all there is for the kitchen scale. All right, so let's work on this stove. Now, I'm going to tell you that this is a big block, right? So, and these are little circles. So you want to go slow. Don't try to go faster than you feel you're comfortable, and just take your time. Pivot when necessary. Now these are all top layers, so I need to do that stay stitch at the beginning and end of each one of these. And this block does not get trimmed down, so try your best to not draw in your background fabric. No puckers. If you get a pucker, then I would suggest you do get a little seam ripper and rip it and try again. And you'll notice I'm going a lot slower on these than I did on the other one because I know I'm not trimming this block down. All right, this towel's going to feel like a breeze now that we have those little wee circles done. All right, I'm going to give both of these blocks a good press, and then we will trim up the scale and have our reveal. All right, so the scale gets trimmed to 6.5 inches. Remember when we laid this out, we made sure that everything was 1/2 inch from the edge. So this should be fairly easy and quick. To wrap up week 6, this week we only had 2 blocks, but that little stove is so cute, and it's like almost the center of our quilt here. But yeah, so here is our stove, and here's our little kitchen scale. Now I did start throwing some of my other blocks on there where they're supposed to be, so you can kind of see how this is coming together. We had the mom's cake recipe that we got done last week, and that cute little tiered cake. Some of our flowers that I was doing by applique instead of hand stitching. They're down here below the stove as well as our kitchen scale. Now there's obviously a lot more blocks to go to fill in this space, but we are getting there one block at a time. I hope you did pick up a few tips or tricks this week. If you have not tried a stabilizer behind your pieces when you're doing machine embroidery, I personally love the tearaway because it's easy to get rid of once I'm done using it as my stabilizer. There's definitely other ones on the market. There's actually one that's like a wash away as well. It's very lightweight, but you can literally run it under water and it will like just melt away off of your piece. So that's another option that you could try out. Just a layer of interfacing would work too if you don't have any stabilizer and you don't feel like buying any. And you saw that when I did the little mock-ups on some scrap fabric for the scale. When I just did the stitching on that plain fabric, it was really puckering and pulling that fabric in. But once I put that onto my dial and I used it with the stabilizer behind it, that tearaway, it really kept all of that real nice and smooth and even. And I didn't have that drawing in and puckering effect that you did without it. So that's definitely a good thing to keep in mind if you're doing machine embroidery or just decorative stitching with your machine. So, and that's the other thing too, check out your decorative stitches on your machine and see what you can use to mimic the hand embroidery that's in this quilt. Maybe you prefer machine over hand, and that's kind of me too, really. So it's just an option for you. If you don't want to do the hand embroidery, check out your decorative stitches and see which ones you can use instead of doing all that handwork. But once again, I do hope you picked up a tip or trick today, and I hope that you are enjoying the Let's Bake Quilt sew along. Until next time, find joy in all you do, carve out some time for crafting and creating, and remember it's always better when you make stuff up.